5.
Hi guys, I am Kim Steven Yap, an international master from the Philippines. You can just call me Coach Steven, is what most of my players call me. Today, we are gonna witness the greatest game ever played in chess. And in my opinion, this is to me, like most grandmasters think, this is the best chess game ever played. And this game is between Bobby Fischer and Boris Spassky. So let's proceed with the game. So the game started with c4, and this move is trying to control the center. Most of us plays e4, but those are just different ideas, but this move still makes a lot of sense because it still controls the center. Black played e6. I played knight f3, still trying to control the center. The center now is on e5. So Black wants to open up already because it's very important to move his bishops out and his pieces out. Now White played d4, still trying to control the center. Knight of f6, knight c3, controlling the pawn, the square on e4. 7, and now White wants to move his bishop out right away. There are theory wherein you don't have to move this bishop on c1. Instead, you play e3. But Fischer is hot in this game. He wants to be a bit aggressive, so he moves his bishop out. He wants to gain activity right away. Black castled. It's important castle early in the opening. And White played e3. And this move has two plans. It's also the bishop is also trying to go out and protect the pawn on c4, so that if Black captures the pawn, for example, White will just recapture the pawn. But Black doesn't want to capture right away, because if you're Black in this situation, you could play c6, wait for White to move bishop e2 before you capture. And this is an idea where most grandmasters know, because it's important to save moves. And in this position, White was already wasting a move when he played bishop e2 followed by bishop c4. So it took him 2 moves to go to c4. But that's not what happened. Instead, Black played h6. Of course, you know the plan. It's very easy to capture the bishop. It's not good to give up pieces. Rule number 1 for beginners. And when your bishop is attacked, White has 2 options. It's to take the knight on f6 or go back to h4. But according to Fischer, bishop is worth 3.5 points, whereas a knight is only 3 points. So it's never a good idea, especially early in the opening, to trade your bishop to knight. But in general, it is equal. So bishop h4, Black played b6. He wants to develop his light squared bishop on b7 on this square, and to control the a8, h1 diagonal. So you can see there are arrows there. And now White captured the pawn on d5 right away. And since Black is planning to move his bishop to b7, he traded his materials right away. He took the pawn with the knight on d5. To take it with the pawn on e6 is also possible. They're both just normal moves. White took the bishop on e7. Black took back. White took the knight, so he exchanged right away. As long as it's equal exchange, it is fine. As long as you don't lose material. You can lose material like a pawn, but it has to be compensated. And when I say compensation, it's either you have to win back the material you lost, your opponent. Now, in this position, it's very important to know where your opponent's weaknesses are. There are only 3 things you have to really master in chess. when you think about the position. First is you have to know where the weaknesses are. And in this position, the c7 pawn is a weakness. It is clear that it can't be protected that easily. The best protector is the pawn, but since it cannot be protected by a pawn, it can be a very troublesome pawn. You cannot play c5 now. I'm sure you know this. I don't have to pause this video because I'm sure you can figure out that when you take, you have to think of the first moves first. Black recaptures, pawn on d5 gets gobbled up. And in chess, one pawn is enough to win. And in this situation, I'm sure white could win more than a pawn. So, and black does not want to do that. And you can also play queen b4. I'm just going to take note that if you want to exchange queens now, it's so bad. Do that. I play queen d2. Trying to exchange the queen. The king is actually safe. He just takes the queen with the king. It's not always, sometimes we have to defy the principles. It's not always correct to just castle early. Sometimes you just have to understand the position in order to become a chess master. And in this position now, there is no way that black could save the pawn on c7 except by playing c6. Now after knight e4 and followed by some simple moves, it is clear that the black's pieces are tied up. They cannot go out. And it's very bad when you have passive pieces. So after c1, black played bishop e6. He still wants to go c5 because if he cannot achieve that move, it's so hard. So white played queen a4, and now black played c5. And still, this pawn is still weak because the rook is really active. Chess, you have to activate your pieces. You have to have the initiative. And in this position, white has the initiative. It's clear that white is the better position. And now we have two pins. After bishop b5, black knight cannot just move out. Say, for example, if he wants to go to d7, white would just recapture it. And then black would be left with a bishop on e7 with a light squared bishop. And in this position, this light squared bishop is a bad bishop since the white's pawns are fixed on light squares, or on dark squares rather. And this light square bishop has no way of attacking this pawn. In chess, you have to be on the attacking side most of the times in order to win because you have to be tactical. You have to win material. And it is very important. The second thing about looking at a position, after looking at the weaknesses, you have to know where the pieces are. You have to have active pieces. So after a6, it's not even a threat. Black cannot capture this bishop on b5, since if he does that, he will lose the rook on e8. And yes, again, we go back to what's important. Material is very important. And here, bishop's worth 3 points, black to black's 5. So white will gain 2 points here. So what do you think white played in this position? Very easy. Of course, you can see that. Take pawn first, take pawn, then you castle. So now black has 2 weaknesses. d5 and c5. And these are really weak pawns because they are loose. Although, now black played rook a7. And what is the threat? What do you think? If you want to know what the plan is, you have to pause the video for a minute. Now let's resume. Of course, black's threat is to capture the bishop on b5. because the rook is now defended by the queen on e7. So white played simple, bishop e2. Of course, you have to be safe. But still, you still have the edge because the c5 and d5 pawns are what we call hanging pawns. They are targets. And black is not even attacking anything as of the moment. None of his pieces are active. They're just all, as you can see, the queen is protecting c5, the rook is protecting c5, the bishop is protecting d5, the knight's protecting a6, the rook's protecting a7. I don't get it. I mean, this is a rare position in chess where you're not really attacking. Well, when you become to, especially at their level, where they are world champions. Now, knight d7. Yeah, of course, it's important to develop your pieces. Now, white played knight d4. Why do you think black cannot take this knight? What is the best move if black ever takes the knight? Pause the video if you want to. But here, if you take the knight, would you take the queen or would you rather take the rook first? Of course, we have to take the rook first. Because in chess, this is what we call intermezzo. Or I think I am wrong. I think it's more important to take the queen. You see, even masters could make mistakes. Because if he plays knight f8, when you take the queen, it's already protected. I was thinking of a second move, wherein this is what we call an in-between check, because I was thinking that black could only move his king out to h7 to breathe. But in this position, well, when you see something that's worth 9 points, maybe you just have to gobble it. Anyway, it assures a win. Well, yeah. So you have to be confident at all times. And now, of course, black can take the knight on d4. And the plan of this move is, as you can see, after what Spassky did in the position, is just to take the bishop. Although it's a bad bishop, but Fischer has a dangerous plan. He wants to break the black's pawn structure and put this bishop in a more active square. As you can see, if black captures the pawn on e4, if you look at all black's pawns, it is very easy to attack those pawns. For example, we can start with bishop c4. I'm now attacking the e6 pawn, and maybe you can protect, but after rook e1, take that pawn. This is what we call pawn islands. In chess, you have to have a few pawn islands as much as possible. And this is a double pawn, but these are, like black has 4 pawn islands, whereas white has 2 pawn islands because most of his pawns are connected. And so if you capture, you will have like all the weaknesses in the world. So I don't think Robert Spassky is that bad to not be able to know that. So after d4, which is what white wanted, because I think this is one of his few options in the position in order to survive for a bit longer, f4 was played in order for black not to fix his pawn on the dark square. Because if he's able to do that, then the white bishop would have no target. So white wants to fix the black's pawn on e6 so that it becomes like a permanent weakness. So after queen e7, it's important to note that black can play e5. Well, if you want to know why, because white can easily just capture back. And after queen e7, you can actually play either e6 right now, because why? Pause the video. Why the pawn is not free. Now let's resume. You cannot take because, of course, the obvious bishop c4. So it's not you cannot really play e5. E5, yeah. So after black played queen e7, white fixed the center. So this knight has less activity, and still black has a lot of problems in the position. The e6 still weak, everything is still weak. So black wanted to do something, like some creative ideas. This is the first time he actually has a plan to double up his rook on the b file. But the problem with this move is it's too late, and at the same time, you can't really capture the pawn on b2 right now. So white played bishop c4 in order to attack the e6, and this move has a threat. What they think is white's plan if it were his turn right now. Pause the video if you want to know. You want to solve it for yourself. So let's resume. Of course, the white bishop is aiming at the pawn on e6, as you can see in the position. And yeah, white just needs to attack it with another piece. What do you think? It's to play f5. For example, if you don't do anything about it, like saying, just play knight f8, you're gonna go f5. And if you react to it, like this is the time you move your king, and go f6. Now, take, this rook takes pawn, and it's so hard for you to defend the pawn on h7. One move to defend the pawn on h6 is queen h7, but after queen h3, this is so dangerous because now white wants to capture the pawn and you'll be a queen down, and it's a resignable position. Well, if you try to protect it with another thing, king d7, the king is just too exposed. It has no clothes. But after bishop d3, it is like black is as dead as a doornail. So black has to move his queen. I don't know where, but if on g8, he gets checkmated. On h8, there's queen g5, followed by queen takes g6, queen g4 rather, queen takes g6 is a mate. So, of course, his opponent, Bobby Fischer's opponent, was a world champion, and he doesn't want to give this game away like so easily. He wants to persevere, and so instead of playing knight f8, he wants to go king h8. Chess, very important to be stubborn. Although you have a losing position, but you can fight. There's even a saying where if you want to beat a grandmaster, you have to win 3 times instead of 1. Well, it's a metaphor. So after queen h3, well, black could actually capture the pawn in b2. But black's pawns are really not that dangerous as white's pawn, considered like pairs with white pawns. Because after that move, for example, white could continue with just bishop c4 again, or maybe bishop b7. Let me do this. I could play rook e1. And now I could push the pawns. The same thing might happen as what I mentioned a while ago. The pawn in h6 gets captured and everything is just so bad for black. Only his rook is good in this position. But I don't think it can harm white's position. Very strong position. And he can't even push his pawn, so it's not really. White's pawns are just too advanced. So, after this position, king h8, queen h3, black played knight f8 in order to protect the pawn on e6. And then white played b3, just to, of course, stop the pawn from being captured. After a5, black just wants to get something, but it's too late. I mean, his plan was really slow in the first place because white took the initiative very early in the opening. So he played f5 right now. And the plan is to gain another file along the f file. Of course, black was forced to capture this pawn because, again, the same thing might happen in the previous example. f6 is just so strong. And now, white double up his rooks. And this is a funny position wherein black cannot do anything. It's called Suzhuang. Queen d8, just to like develop the rook on a7, make it a good piece Fischer played queen g3. The idea is very simple. He wants to play h4 in this position. Why? Because after h4, the black knight can no longer activate, cannot annoy white's position. Sometimes it's all about being Nicholson. In this position, and since white knows that black can achieve in the position, so he has all the time in the world to improve his position, make progress. Play rook e7, white played h4, and then black played rook b7, Fischer played e6. Of course, in chess, you want to centralize your pieces. And black cannot even capture the pawn. So, after rook c7, because the plan was really to capture the pawn on c5, this rook has to protect the pawn on c5. Fischer played queen e5. And this is a funny moment where we can actually understand what zugzwang really means. e8. a4, queen d7, rook f2, queen e8, rook f3. So the queen was dancing from d8 to e8. Since black has not much option, all he could do was to move back his queen back and forth. Why? Because, for example, you might want to consider some lines like rook c8 here. Problem is, I go rook here, take, and it's over, because what can you do? Let's say, for example, I'm trying to checkmate you on g7. So how do you defend a g7 pawn? There are two ways, I guess. Like, one of those ways is to play, for sure, queen g8. After the move e8, it's over. Because there's no way you can stop rook to f8. You will lose your queen. Whatever you do, you will lose your queen. If you move your queen, you get checkmated on g7. So it's very annoying. And the other way to defend the checkmate is what do you think? Pause the video if you want to find it. Here, it's resume. Black could play knight to f6. And how do you win? Well, it's easy. These positions, you do not have to think much of sacrificing. Like, if you sacrifice, it's actually almost always good. Now I think you can do either king h7 or king g8. But here, you're just going to lose the game. Well, if you try to exchange the queens, I can promote a queen. A new queen! And if you play queen d7, isn't that just a checkmate too, guys? I'm sure you can find it. So I will not have to tell you. So in this position, another thing, but it's just the same. Let's just do it a little bit faster. And this is over. Well, same thing could happen. You could actually survive for a bit longer here, but it's just over. Well, it looks like your past one's gonna give you something, but it's just easy to defend it. Or I don't even have to go bishop b5. And this is a simple win for white, because all he has to do is capture, gobble up all the pawns, and then it's just a win. Well, you have a bishop, a very strong bishop. And so, of course, black was in zugzwang, so he's forced to play rook, queen d8. Now, white proceeded with his plan. He played bishop d3 first, to queen e8, queen e4. And this is where the fun thing happens. Because when you play bishop d3, it was timing. Fischer has thought of this position already before you play. Now, what happens if I take the pawn? Isn't that just free? Can you find the best move here? Pause the video if you want. Solve it for yourself. So let's resume. Well, the best move here. Okay. And since if you capture, this is an in-the-face mate. It's the king and queen are sticking to each other. So you can't capture the pawn, you can't do that. What else can you do? And rook f8 is already a threat, so of course you can only play one move, since this is almost unstoppable. You can only play knight f6. But that doesn't help you, because in this position, since white's pieces are just so active, he can actually just sacrifice his pawn, his rook for the knight, and he's still gonna end up in a huge advantage. Actually, this is what we already call a clear win, because yeah, white is already trying to capture the pawn on h6. He played bishop c4 first because he knows that black cannot move anything. He can't move his queen. He cannot move his rook on e7. He can only move his king. That's why he's called Zugzwang in the first place. For example, he moves his queen. Of course, he will lose touch over this square. And you cannot even block because, yeah, this is the main purpose why to move the bishop c4 in order to freeze the rook. So and it's not only the rook on e7 that's frozen. It's all the rook on c7 is also dead, and black is actually just waiting for resignation. So for his own resignation, and after king h8, queen 8, f4, and now black actually resigned the game. And why did he resign? Because it's obvious that there is no way white can stop the threat of either winning the queen or checkmating. Let's see what black can do now. For example, he wants to move back his king again. Well, white could just take the pawn on h6, and the threat is clear. To play rook g6, what can black do? He cannot move his rook, right? For example, he goes here, this move, and boom. And it's just a checkmate. Maybe you can go here, but I still go there. 2 queens on the board, and a checkmate. What else can he do? Well, that's why he resigned in the first place, because there is nothing he can do. Here, well, this is clear. Rook f8 is a threat. So that's why I love this game so much, because the moves were just so simple. There was not much fireworks on the board, but it was like a really well played game where black was just outplayed from start to finish. It all started with the pawn on c7 being attacked by the rook along the c file, and everything was just vanished. Like there was nothing black can do in the position. It was almost a perfect game where black did not really create a blunder or a big mistake. It was just white just compounded his advantage like what a real greatest of all time player would do. Well, Fischer was considered as one of the best players in the world. To most grandmasters, he's qualified as the GOAT. Yeah, and the good thing about this game is that when Spassky lost, instead of being sour at himself, he actually praised Fischer. He actually clocked his opponent. It's rare to see that. So Spassky, as a world champion, was a very humble person to do. Well, thank you guys for listening. I hope you learned a lot from this game. I'm going to see you next time. Remember, Coach Steven of Chessmatic. Bye. Yo, so are you still there?